the strangest people you meet in the weirdest places. So if you've listened to our Gaia Says No podcast series, you'll have heard his dulcet tones, but now you can see him. Angus Forbes, how are you?
Sumit, I am so well, and all the better for seeing you, mate.
Oh, the biggest liar on the planet. It's here. There are politicians lying there that you're here.
They can learn a thing or two from me.
Mate, it's been great to see you. Tell us what's been going on, because we did our series on Gaia Says No. We talked all about what Global Planetary Authority, your idea of this kind of global governance movement. Yeah. What's been happening since?
So what's happened is that I met up with a group of social movement builders, and I took the idea to them. And they said, okay, Angus, what you've done is thought exploration work. I'm like, okay, I didn't know that. So you've looked at a concept, you've explored it, you've checked it out like that. What we're going to do is we'll take it to 100 focus groups around the world. We know how to slice and dice this, and we'll take your book to them, and the idea that humanity is getting ready to enter global governance above the nation state for the first time to protect a biosphere, and we'll see what they think. But I'll tell you right off, we're taking this horse out for a trot, and if it's not a runner, we're going to shoot it, right? And you can go home, have your Marmite sandwich, right? But it's done. And they came back and they said, listen, the focus groups have come back. And they said that it sounds imperialistic and colonial and white and northern, and we don't like the name. And if we do enter global governance above the nation state, how do we make sure there's no tyranny and corruption up there? And how do we have power when we create this agency up there and all these things? And you haven't spelt that out in the book. So they really attacked the concept. But they concluded with, we want the invitation. We want to go. As long as we co-create it, as long as we create the agency that we want to have up there. And of course, that's the only way, right? And so from that piece of work, now the social movement is being built and ready for its initial launch next year. We got our first piece of funding from a foundation, which is great. And a few other little sources, and then basically hopefully there'll be 2 years of initial work of the movement launching up to a global launch in 2 years' time.
To people who haven't, and how dare they not
How
hear
dare
it?
they?
How dare they now? But in a nutshell, explain your idea.
If you love soccer, you have FIFA, and all they do, these men and women in FIFA, all they do is they think about the soccer pitch. 11 against 11. How many referees? VAR. They're always adjusting to make sure the game of soccer is enjoyed by the 3 or 4 billion people who enjoy soccer. Yeah. Now humanity has reached a point that we run a planet with Mother Nature. That's never going to end. So even when we stop climate change, we're going to have to worry about man-made chemicals. When we stop worrying about man-made chemicals, which is never, we're going to have to worry about mining on the sea floor. Once we stop worried about that, we'll have to worry about intergalactic mining missions coming back to Earth. The game now is that the relationship between humans and the Earth at this power level is never going to go away. So let's put in a FIFA or an international netball federation, a specialist authority who says, listen, humanity, we don't care if you become all communists. We don't care if you live to 200 years old and plant AI in your head. We don't care what you're going to do for the next 500, 1,000, 2,000 years. Our job is we're going to keep this planet alive and healthy. And we're going to create, say, all the rainforests as a global protectorate. Half of the oceans as a global protectorate. We're going to have more and more biodiversity hotspots. We're going to put in carbon taxes and bring that number from 415 back down to 280. And we'll do it slowly, because we can't just plant trees everywhere. No. Because then we have the
there you go. People celebrating your
See,
idea.
they know. They know it's right. They know it's right. So it's just time for humanity to go up a gear above the nation state.
Some would say that that's what's going on there, over at COP right there, just over our shoulder there, that they're talking about this. They've had this announcement about deforestation. They've had a commitment of 100 billion finally being paid up. They're looking at the oceans. And why is there a need for this idea of yours, a concept to protect the planet, which is transitions all national boundaries? Do you believe any of that stuff that's gone on?
I do believe in it. I do believe that incrementalism is important. But at the end of the day, we simply have a structural design flaw. In 1972, all the nations came together and they signed the Stockholm Declaration, which said that the natural assets of the earth must be safeguarded.
And 50 years ago.
50 years ago next year.
Yeah.
Every single asset is worse, except for ozone. And even then, we're relying on Mother Nature to repair herself at the ozone level. Because no one wants to go up where Felix Baumgartner jumped out of his Red Bull canister to throw O3 molecules around. No one wants to go up there, right? We just pray that it's all going to smooth out again. So we have a structural design flaw. And people go on and about, this national leader is rubbish and doesn't get it. All the nation leaders over the last 40, 50 years have got it. It's just that they are compromised to do another job.
Yeah.
They're just not designed to do it. It's like having Barcelona, Manchester United, Sydney FC, and say to them, "Hey, work out the rules of soccer." They say, "Well, no, we're football teams. We hate each other, right? We're supposed to compete against each other." Yeah. So you've got to go and say, "Let's put in a specialist agency that can do this stuff properly." Now, one other point. 1979 was the first World Conference on global warming. And all the nations rocked up again. And their final decree was, global warming is a serious problem. And the parts per million that year was 336, up from 280. They said it was a serious problem in 1979. And I'll bet you a euro, or a dollar, a pound, that the year that we go net zero will be 2079. It's almost written in the stars.
Why?
It's going to be 100 years. Because they're not structured to do it. And the Chinese say, hey, they've already said, let's go for 2 degrees, 2050-ish. Yeah. The Indians, naturally, 2070, naturally, because they want it. Energy is life, energy is necessary, you know what I mean? But maybe if we'd had a supreme agency, they would have seen this early in the 80s and say, guys, we've got to start this now. We're bringing in carbon taxes, We've got to get wealth transfer from the rich to the poor to do this because, that's their only job, carbon, oceans. So I feel after 3 waves of national self-determination, which is what we've had, 1850s, post the First World War, post the Second World War, decolonialization action, we've had 3 waves of creating countries. We're going to have the first wave of creating a global agency above the nation state.
Before we end, let's look at where we are right now. You're one man, right? You're trying to create a movement. It's this whole thing, I think. Today's Youth Day when we're recording this, and I've just been actually knocked out by some young kids we spoke to, some of the scouts who are there speaking. So, just over your shoulder, there's loads of people demonstrating right now, and there's this kind of mass movement thing. But the reality is there's always going to be people who protest. There's always going to be people. And the rest of us, as they say, we've got our day jobs. We've got to get on with life. Yeah, I spoke to a taxi driver, said, are you interested in cop? He said, not me. That's the worst Scottish accent ever. He said, I don't give a shit about it because I want to go and see my doctor and I can't see my doctor. How do we transform this? Because we all know we need the planet. This is where we live. How do we transform this into kind of not saying that there's a certain group who are really campaigning and if you're not part of it, but it's something we can all do. What's your idea of how this will happen? Because I think you've got an idea that the way that technology will unleash will allow this to happen.
That's the beauty of it, is it's only going to take you and me 2 minutes when it comes to it, because we will vote this to give our personal sovereignty to create this agency. So it's a straight power play. Let's not make this is not asking China, asking the British Parliament. We're going to walk past because there's 5 billion of us online. And in history, the most famous acts of self-determination where you create the structure you want to have happens at 100 to 1. We have 5 billion and the amount of people that control the 195 nation states and soldier them is 50 million. So for the first time in human history, we've got to the 100 to 1, but at the global level above the nation state. So we don't have to march. There's nowhere to march until the day comes when we're all going to do it on our phones and we're going to allocate up, we're going to vote together. And if a nation state or some nation states, the governments who we have just walked past, don't like the agency and say we don't acknowledge this agency, even though the people of the world have just created it, we close the system down. And you might remember Ceausescu, the Romanian dictator.
I certainly
And we all remember that day. We'd had the Velvet Revolution. We'd had 1989.
Yeah.
He said, I can still hold this thing. And he looked down and the people just went, nah,
exactly.
you're done. We're past.
Yeah.
And he was dead later that week.
Yeah.
So it's going to be easy to do, but we just have to believe we can do it. And our leaders are coming who are going to take us there.
Here's a middle-aged revolutionary I can get behind.
Hey,
Mate, thanks for joining us again.
Good to see you. Thank you for having me.